So guys, welcome back to my channel. Well, I've decided to get rid of my trusty XT3 and equipment. I've denied about this probably for the last 5 months. I've shot on the Fuji system now probably for going on just over 2 years. Firstly with the XT2, XT3, and if you've seen some other videos, you know that I've used the kit lens, the 1855 and the 55-200, and then the 1024, which are absolutely cracking lenses, also for landscape video. So pretty much couldn't falter it. But I saw when Canon brought out their EOS R, I went and had a look at it and picked it up and sort of fell in love with it. And I was very tempted at the time to jump ship, head over to Canon from Fuji and give it a go. Purely because I wanted to get into a bit more full frame rather than the APC sensor from there. So last week I decided to jump ship. I've got rid of all my Fuji gear and I've now got my trusty EOS R camera, which is what I'm filming on right now. Now originally I was very tempted to do this, and there was a couple of things that put me off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through a few videos and trips out just to try and see if this camera holds its own against the Fuji system. Now, I did have a look at other manufacturers, potentially Sony, which does get awesome reviews as well, and certainly on a par with the Canon. Now it does have a lot more technical stuff, but for me, it was all about really just picking the camera up and how good it felt in my hands, which is the one thing that the Fuji had, was you could pick it up. It was a lovely camera to use, and you felt like you wanted to go out and shoot with it. And I think you'll find that with most people say that with the Fuji system. It was just, everything was at hand. You could go out and it was just a joy to use. Now when I picked up a Sony, and again, this is just my own personal view from it, it felt wrong. And it's just that personal thing. Whereas I picked up the Canon EOS R and straight away I thought, I'll enjoy this, I like this, I want to go out and use it. And that to me was you know, a great feeling. And I think it's very much like if you go out and buy a car, you can look at Mercedes, you look at BMW, you can look at Audi, you can get in each one's going to get you to A to B, but each one's got a slightly different feel to it, each one's got a slightly different kit on it, so it's all down to personal preference. On here, someone will pick a Sony camera up and love that. Some people will pick a Fuji camera up and love that. But at the end of the day, they're all going to give you excellent results from your for your images at the end of the day. For me, the Canon put down some of mine when it first came out. I picked it up, I loved it, but the slow shutter speeds for sports was something I like to do. A little bit of motorsport photography purely on an amateur basis. So I'm going to do a video. I'm going to head up to a local racing circuit and just try it with a few moving cars just to see how that pans out. And hopefully it won't prove too much of an issue. So mostly I tend to shoot landscape on there, and it's all purely as an amateur. It's just something that I do for fun to get away from my day job. The other thing that stopped me going it was everyone was complaining about the lack of 4K on this camera, and the lack of image stabilization for it. So far with the RF lens, not found it a problem. I've managed to be able to pick this camera up and hold it at arm's length, and found the footage that's certainly as stable, if not more stable, than if I was hand holding the Fuji XT3 on there. The added bonus is you've got the little flip screen to make sure that you have got yourself in frame, in focus, and the light. So from that point of view, it was a lot easier on there. One card slot, not an issue to me. I can go back and shoot it the next day. Maybe if you're a wedding photographer, this camera may not be for you, but 2.5 years I've not had a card failure, although people do talk about having card failures on there. There is an app that Canon do to go with this. I haven't tested it out fully yet, but it will actually download your photos direct to the phone if you so desire, so that could be an option if needed on there. Now the other big thing is coming from a Fuji is the weight. Fuji, awesome for a travel camera. You can have a camera, 3 lenses, put it in your backpack, and it is not an issue at all. whereas overall the full frame cameras tend to be heavier. The lenses certainly are a lot heavier, especially if you're getting up to bigger zoom lenses. So that's something to bear in mind if you are moving across to a full frame system on there. Another thing I found with Canon is coming from Fuji is long exposures. I've found that you can only put the shutter speed to 30 seconds, whereas with Fuji you could wind it up to 4 minutes, 6 minutes, etc. So you have to go into bulb mode, and then you can set a timer inside of it to work out your exposure on there. So it means using an app again to work it out, whereas with the Fuji it was great because you could set your focus, set your scene up, and then put your filter in, and then adjust the shutter speed until the exposure was right, and it worked out 9 times out of 10 absolutely spot on. So that was what I thought was always fantastic on there. Do we need all the tech that Sony offers? Not necessarily. The frames, Canon's catching up now with the latest update. You can have it on servo, which is their autofocus, which is doing the eye tracking, which I think does a good job. If I move in and out here, it's picking me up on the screen there, and at the moment it's picking me up on my right eye, and it will face track me around. So it's as good as it's as going to get for what I need on there. Maybe if you're a portrait photographer, it may not be up to speed of Sony, but again, it's all swings and roundabouts with all these cameras. They're all going to give you a good result in my view at the end of the day. What the good selling points for this camera, which none of the other competitors are offering at the moment, is the flippy screen. Certainly between the ones that I've been looking at, and to me that's a huge advantage on there. Some people say they don't like it, but that's again my personal preference on there, and just be able to have the view of the screen here on the right hand side of as I'm looking at it. I can see that I'm in focus, I can see I'm on there, I can see the shutter speed, I can see the f-stop, I can see the ISO, and I know it's going to give me what I wanted. Whereas with the Fuji, unless you mount an external monitor, it was always a bit hit and miss, especially if you're holding it up and doing a bit of vlogging, if that's what you're into. Touchscreen on this camera is absolutely superb. None of the other cameras offer that, certainly between Fuji and Sony, which were the other two that I've looked at or have, and it's absolute breeze, absolute dream to use on this camera, and I think it makes a huge difference to the actual experience that this camera offers you. I've shoot in manual 99% of the time, so I like to adjust my ISO, f-stop and shutter speed on the fly, and I've got the dials on there to be able to do that manually, the same as I did on the Fuji system. But again, with the screen, I can just hit that screen, touch it, focus points, everything. So that's really good to me. As I say, with the videos, I'll try and show a little bit more of that as we go. One of the main reasons for changing over to full frame was, as I do a landscape photography, or aspire to, but hopefully it'll give me a little bit more depth, field, stuff that I can pull out of the image for that, which sometimes with Fuji, I found it lacking a little bit on there, and again, that's just my personal view on it. Canon Colour and Portraits, when I picked it up in the shop and was just having a play around with it, the colour on there was definitely a lovely colour when you come to portraits with this camera. I'm not a portrait photographer, I dabble, but again, just they look like they pop out the screen at you, which was always quite hard, I thought, with the Fuji shots that I took on there. And this comes with an RF lens, which is Canon's new technology on there. It's supposed to give you right out good pictures right out to the side of the lenses. It's got a control ring on it. Generally, it's very nice to use, so I haven't had any issues with that yet. So they're my initial thoughts on this camera, and why I've moved across to Canon from Fuji. I need to do a lot more experimenting in it, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out this camera on a few trips. I'm going to try and do a bit of vlogging with this camera while I do that, and a little bit of help from my GoPro, which is my little backup camera for run and gunning. And as I say, the other big thing was trying to do a bit of fast action sports photography. as well, which people say with the frames per second are not that great on it, which I'm hoping that we can get around that and we can get some cracking shots out of this camera for it. So I'll head up to my local racing circuit up at Goodwood, and I'll try and do a little blog up there and try and get some pictures just to see how this thing handles on there. Anyway guys, that's it for this video. Hopefully you found it useful, my thoughts. I'm sure there's lots of people with differing views on what the best camera is to use, whether it be Fuji, Canon or any other manufacturer. It is all down to personal preference and how you feel when you pick a camera up, in my view. I'm no expert, and I'm learning all the time with photography as a whole. So hopefully a new learning experience with this camera, something else to learn being full frame. And hopefully in the coming videos I can show you what this little camera can do. So thanks for watching, hope you found it useful, and subscribe to the channel just to stay up to tune with the videos coming up as I test this camera out in a real world situation from there. Thank you.